Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and tonight I'm joined by Chris McElwain and Quinny. Quinny and I obviously met up earlier on today where we were going into the last few hours of the window, kind of hoping that people would get their finger out. Quinny went away and got the suit on. He's at that point now that he's doing the Brendan, the tie's off, everything is coming off bit by bit as we enter the last 55 minutes of the window. And to be honest, I think it's no holds barred at this stage, Quinny, because, I mean, I'm running with the tagline, how not to do football business, how not to, go into a transfer window and try and do business with other teams and negotiate with other clubs, like professional football clubs, how not to behave like an amateur. I mean, these are the things that, unfortunately, we're going to have to discuss, Quinny. I mean, we should be looking at parts of a jigsaw, just elements of a team that we heard about from Brendan Rodgers that they were required after the Bayern Munich game. Just small elements of a winning side, a successful team that you can tweak and improve on. And here we are. And it's up to this point quite simply been a comedy of errors, Quinny.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth with the tie thing, by the way. So kudos on that. Absolutely telegraphed that perfectly. But yeah, and how to lose money and alienate fans, I think you'd maybe call this. Like today, honestly, like it's been absolutely zipping, because it's just went from bad to worse on like so many levels. It's so hard to even put it into words in some ways, just how it's sitting right now. I was just saying this in a chat with somebody, like we should be in the Champions League, like you know what I mean, for a start. Never mind all of this muck that we're now really up to our elbows in. And just wow, just what a week. Like seriously, just how it's just went down like that.
2 weeks. Yeah.
What I want to start off with is Adam Idah. Right. So we broke our transfer record when we signed this player for £8.5 with £1 million add-ons, Chris. And at the time, I asked every contributor in Acsom going into the that tickly bit of the transfer window, at the beginning of last season, do we spend the money on Adam Idah? Has he done enough? And everybody, to a man that I spoke to, said, he done as much as anybody in the last 6 months of the season to win us a double. He scores in the Scottish Cup final. He's written his name into Celtic history in doing so. We had to start acting like this club that wanted to make progress in the Champions League. And if that cost 8, 9, 10 or even £11 million, then that's what we had to start doing. So you were hoping at that point, Chris, that we had moved on from the bargain basement. We have basically been reduced today and tonight into the whoops aisle. We are looking for everything that nobody else wants. The players that we are now being linked to haven't been on any of our lists at any point. They've not been profiled, they've not been scouted. We are now scratching about, trying to get bodies in the door. But I want to start off with Idah, because that's what I'm talking about with a comedy of errors. So we've got a player there who there were signs, Chris, there were signs that maybe all was not well. During the pre-season, there was obviously the viral video last season, and Brendan Rodgers stood up for the player. He scores 20 goals. And you're thinking to yourself, right, not a bad season. You can work on that. Good Champions League campaign, the first campaign under his belt. Yet things were not well, and he didn't play well in the first game against St Mirren. I spoke to Quinny before that game, actually. Beautiful day, rubbish performance. We managed to scrape a result. And Rodgers comes out and says, no, he was excellent. Idah was not excellent that day. And then it looks as though he's going to go and sign for Swansea. And I put it out the other day on the Twitter page because, at the end of the day, we're talking about the club being connected. Yes. Everything in the club being connected. Brendan comes out firing, all guns blazing. We're connected, Chris. Everybody at the club is connected. We're all working together. We're all in tandem. And actually, from that press conference, I'm thinking, so it's only the fans that are disconnected from all of you guys then. Because Adam Idah, right, was on his way down to Swansea. Not just because they were interested, because we're just getting fed a pack of lies here, because he'd actually had a medical. They had got the pictures in the can ready to announce the signing of Adam Idah. And bizarrely, before a Rangers game, we call him back up the road. We call him back up to Glasgow. It turned into a farce, Chris. He has finally left the football club. without us having a replacement, which is what Brendan Rodgers said we were going to have in place before he goes. Absolute nonsense we're getting fed here.
Yeah. The smile on my face is, believe me, I'm not enjoying this. It's if you don't laugh, you cry at what's going on. Look, there was a big element when we signed Idah for me, and it wasn't so much about bringing in a player for 9 million or 10 million or 11 million or anything like that. What it demonstrated to me was evidence, at least it appeared as evidence at the time, that the club was going to back the manager, right? And we all had the memory of John McGinn, and in our memories at that point, we thought, is there going to be a catalyst here? If the manager's not going to get his players, is he going to walk? None of us wanted to see that at the time. So for me, the signing of Idah, and indeed by extension Arne Engels, at that time I thought, okay, finally we've got the club backing the manager, right? I never viewed Idah as being our number one striker, certainly not at that time when we had Kyogo, but I thought he represented a statement of intent from both the manager and the club. But for whatever reason, he, for me, did enough to earn the move at that time. Absolutely has dropped off from the latter part of last season into this season. I think he's now, I've no issue with the player moving on. What I've got issues with is what the hell is the process behind the scouting, the attempted recruitment, and the selling of key assets within the team. Right now, whether Idah's on form or not, the fact is he is our default striker, number one striker. So if you want to let him go, fine, get a replacement in, have someone lined up. All of those components should be lined up. They should all be aligned. They should all be connected, as you've said. And connections, this word we keep hearing from the manager, from the board, from different people who want to big up the what's going on behind the scenes at the club. It's a shambles. It's an absolute disgrace, because you are playing with the fans' faith. You are abusing the trust.
We're playing with the fans' money, Chris. It's not their money.
Absolutely. look at the purchases, the merchandise, the chucking out strips every 10 minutes. And yet they keep telling us, yes, we've got a strategy, we've got a process. Trust the process. What process?
There
what
is
the
no
process?
strategy.
It's
There's
failed.
no strategy.
If there's a process, it's failed. It's absolutely failed. The evidence is it's failed. We are 49 minutes away from not being able to sign any players unless we get bargain bin free transfers. There is no opportunity within 49 minutes of bringing in any players that we really need to augment and support the current squad. So it's just a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace, and there should be accountability. That's my biggest annoyance. There's no indication of accountability on this.
It's a closed shop, Chris. That's the problem. Yeah. Starting off with Idah, we're being told, Quinny, that he will not be allowed to leave the football club until we get a replacement. We're now running with Shin Yamada, who at this point hasn't had enough time to prove himself, right? But when he was signed, Brendan Rodgers more or less distanced himself from the signing. This is when Brendan was talking about club signings versus his signings. And he was obviously briefed by the PR department very quickly not to talk like that, because he completely changed his language and he spoke about players for the future. And Amura might still go out on loan. We'll be talking about some of the other departures from the football club. But Idah was allowed to leave the football club, Quinny, without a replacement coming in. Earlier on today, our thumbnail showed 3 signing targets, and it looked as though we were homing in and bringing these players into the football club. Unfortunately, some of them are not going to be coming to Celtic, and we're now scratching about. We thought the Dolberg deal was a brilliant deal. That's a type of player, a type of profile, Quinny. You think, right, he's somebody who's going to improve our starting 11. And basically, we've been usurped by Ajax coming in, because Ajax now need a striker, Quinny. Because we didn't do the business quick enough, and Ajax now need a striker. Get the business done, and Ajax aren't in the equation.
Yeah, totally. It's if it can get worse, it will. Kind of vibes, isn't it? And I think Idah does, I'm kind of with he's on everything that we've just kind of went through there, but I think the problem with Idah is really, in reality, should have been like the O replacement, and then he kind of ended up becoming the de facto Kyogo replacement, and then we still actually had to replace Kyogo and now we need to replace Adam Idah, and now it's kind of like we're still replacing O with Yushin Yamada, because that's kind of where his position is now when he gets brought into the team. So it's just a weird cycle. Everything's kind of went through it in that way, and like, you know what I mean? Like, if they're going to, you know, if things are that desperate and last minute and everything else as well, like the boy's coming over from Sweden, by all accounts, that's going to get done. I think he's all right. But again, as a Yang replacement or something, you can kind of deal with a player like that coming in that's not expected to really, like you say, change the level of the starting 11, but maybe just help the squad freshen up, balance out again, whatever. But yeah, it's just the absolute lack of top of the food chain level guys that, you know, we were linked to. We have been sniffing in and around, and you know, all the names, we've all seen them and been over them throughout the summer. But for one reason or another, you know, it's just Mickey Mouse stuff, you know, like, and who knows, because half the stuff is maybe rumor. You don't know what's true or not. It's really hard to, but from unanswered emails and phone calls from, who was it was even saying that like a month ago? Was it Segrist or something like that? This isn't like something that's just came out today, you know, like it's so and I also, and again, I don't know if it was a joke or anything like that, so I'm really sorry if it wasn't, right? But I could have swore like this morning or last night I seen something and it was like Celtic and Anderlecht have agreed a deal for Dolberg of like €8.5 million up front or something, and then Celtic's written offer was like 7.8, and they tried to like check. So again, I don't know if that was real or not, so please fact check me on that. I'm really happy to be wrong or corrected or whatever, but if that is like, it's like secondhand car sales stuff, you know what I mean? Like it's crazy. Like if this stuff is believed to be the case, on phone calls and emails and trying to be fly with pricing and, oh, did you mean euros? I thought you meant pounds, or you know, whatever they're trying to do, if that's what's happened. It's just, it staggers belief.
When Chris talks about a strategy, the strategy is to make as much money as humanly possible, Chris. I mean, we spoke earlier on, Quinny and I, about a fact that, right, okay, who's the best manager Celtic could possibly attain? And I actually think Quinny was right. I don't know if we spoke about it on the show. It was after the show, Quinny, because we said, you know, we're not going to get better than Brendan Rodgers. And in actual fact, because, and by the way, I know that there's issues there as well, and that's something that we're going to be discussing. But in terms
on paper.
On paper, exactly. So you think to yourself, right, who are we going to replace him with? I mean, I honestly believe we got lucky with Ange Postecoglou. We got lucky with him. That wasn't due to some great strategy behind the scenes where we scoured the Americas, remember that statement, about bringing in the best possible manager. Absolutely not. We got lucky, and Ange kind of threw a grenade in there because Celtic claimed that, you know, we had been tracking Ange Postecoglou alongside the Eddie Howe thing. Nonsense. We contacted Ange Postecoglou 3 days or 2 days after Eddie Howe told us to bolt. And Eddie Howe wanted to bring his backroom staff in. No. We'll stick with the stale, the tried and tested that are behind the scenes, that don't rock the boat, that will report back to A, B, and C. And that was the big issue with Eddie. So Ange Postecoglou comes in, absolute luck, stroke of luck. And we spoke on Friday night to the Not Review guys, and Andy Murdoch said that, you know, in recent history, there's only been 2 windows that bucked this particular trend that we are so frustrated by. And the 2 windows were Ange Postecoglou's first 2 windows, where he comes in, and we really needed like every player to hit the ground running and make an impact in the first team. And virtually they did. Virtually, you know, the ones we mentioned was obviously the 2 Sheffield Wednesday boys, James McCarthy. It didn't work out. All the rest of them in the team, improving the starting 11 and really making that impact. And we had to make that impact, keep us within touching distance until the new year and go again in January. And that's what we did. We went out, we got Matt O'Reilly, and we brought in Dyson Maeda, and we brought in Rio Atati. And these guys were the real deal. See, since then, it has been shambolic, and there's been a few here or there. But what I would say as well, Chris, is if you're talking fall guys, ramifications, you know, who's going to be held responsible for this? Probably Paul Tisdale. He will be the guy that's held up. He'll be the guy that loses his job over this. And, I don't think that's where the problem is. I think the problem starts higher up the chain.
I think it has to, right? Because you can't, I mean, I agree with you, he'll be the sacrificial lamb, right? Somebody will be hung out to dry, because I think someone has to. And look, I've no doubt that he's potentially part of what is a broken machine at the moment. And it's a machine of many parts. You've got I think you've got a majority shareholder who acts like an owner and acts, by all accounts, in a very dictatorial fashion, which I think is wrong. You've got a CEO who's not qualified to be a CEO under any circumstance, and is not measured based on any performance targets that make sense to anyone looking from the outside in, who's on a ridiculous amount of money, and for a multitude of seasons now has not delivered. You have a backroom staff, which, as you say, is stale. I think, if we take John Kennedy, not to single him out, but you take John Kennedy, I think he's been at the club for at least a decade. Now, if you're at a club for a decade, you ain't changing, you ain't bringing new ideas, you're not innovating, you just can't. You're in a comfort zone. There, you're not going to challenge a manager. You've had multiple managers there, and you've managed to retain your place. You're not doing that if you're upsetting the apple cart. So there is something festering within the club hierarchy, within the decision-making process, within the governance structure. And I'm sorry to use the corporate terms, but the fact is that these people are trying to operate a football club like a corporate operation, but in my opinion, quite a poorly run corporate operation. Because a lot of people say, well, look at the amount of money we've got. Well, yeah, fantastic. Weigh that up against the amount of money we would have had we put an appropriate strategy in terms of recruitment, in terms of forward thinking, in terms of making sure we made it to the Champions League. In any business, I've said this before, in any business, if you're the person that makes a decision or fails to make the right decision, and it costs you what looks like a very high potential £40 million revenue gain, you're cut from that.
The thing is, Chris, you're talking about running it as a corporate entity. If they were to do that, they'd be sacked. If they were working in any other industry,
that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. If you're in a corporate organisation, there is accountability, right? You're accountable and you are measured based on your output. Where's that happening at our football club?
I totally agree. I think, like, if you even walk that one step up from there and think, if they are really, that's the way they run the business and that's the way it is and everything, how should they be looking at this? And if you are like the top decision maker, say it's Dermot Desmond or whatever, who is the most valuable person involved in all the to-ing and the throwing? It is going to be Brendan Rodgers, and by all accounts, Paul Tisdale's his man. They've got a bit of a working relationship or whatever from all the reports you read. Anyone else that's associated with this is completely replaceable. There is 1,000 other people that could do every other job in the football team except for the manager, because there is not 1,000 other people we could get to do the level of job that he does. So
agree.
Whoever's the top decision maker, that's the way it needs to be looked at. If there is a dispute or there is like a 50-50, because really, like, again, if something changed dramatically and Brendan and Tisdale get new contracts and all that, or I'm just putting his name in there just for the sake of it, right? What do I know the input of who's doing what, right? But then that's something, the bare minimum at this point. But like you said, absolutely, it's not even ran like a proper business in that way as well. If it, because like I was saying to Paul John before, like, you could not ask for a better manager than Brendan Rodgers. They could not wish for any more money in the bank. We have literally built every piece of infrastructure that you could want to spend money on. So it's not even, we might need to do that tomorrow, kind of thing. And it's still like managing to fall on its face. They could not, it could not go better. Now
I don't know how well you're seeing this, but you're probably watching. There's people worldwide watching these on big screens, Chris, which is quite handy. Quite handy when you're looking a bit rough. Not saying you specifically, but Anthony Joseph, the award-winning journalist, and he of a Celtic state of mind, he's been breaking news all day long today. So a big shout out to Anthony, by the way. What a job he's been doing. Celtic have made a late bid. Now this is one I'm going to throw over to you, Quinny. What do you make of this? It's understood that they're working frantically. That's because they have got 37 minutes to sign the Nigeria international before tonight's 11 p.m. deadline. This is a player, Iheanacho, I think you've mentioned him before, Quinny. I don't know in dispatches if you have. Celtic tried to sign him, and that's where it will probably come from, on loan in January, but the 28-year-old chose to join Middlesbrough instead, like Riley McGree. What do you make of this one, Quinny?
Again, if it's to replace Adam Idah in the sense of like the number 2 striker, I really don't mind this. Number 1, Seville are skint. Like, they're so skint now, it's untrue. So this should be really easy to get done. You know, I don't think this will be a problem at all.
Famous last words.
Oh, yeah. Wish you hadn't said
Yeah.
that,
but, well, yeah, fair enough. You never know. But they are mega skint, you know, so they'll probably just bite at one of these offers that we send through the fax machine. They've got out back of the office somewhere. I was a big Ian Atchell fan when he was younger. He's 28. He's not really kicked on, but when he broke onto the scene, like, it's one thing that's always stuck with me with him, and it's the smallest of silver linings at this stage of the game. But like, when he first broke on, his minutes per goal was better than Rashford's. That was kind of like his thing, you know, for like a couple of years, like 3 seasons or something. So he's all right. He's quite good, I think, you know, but if you look at his numbers now, he's obviously not went anywhere. He's not doing anything. He's not pulling up trees. Could he score goals in Scotland? It's probably not too bad of a shout, but it's you know, I'm not justifying it or saying it's a good signing, so no one come at me with it. Just
Not at all.
Not a bad guy.
We're desperate now. We're in the desperate aisle. This is the bottom line, Quinny, right? And we talk about what we try and do in Acsom is we try and talk to people who are involved in things like scouting networks. We try to talk to agents. We try to figure out how this business is done, Quinny. And this isn't how we understand that Celtic should be doing business, you know, just scratching about. This player will have been offered to Celtic in the last couple of hours because we're desperate for a striker.
Yeah, I was going to say, Gary in the chat said it, but I was very close to tweeting Tony Watt, see if he would be up for it.
Tony, as long as he brings the socks. As long as he brings the socks. Tony Watt, brilliant. Slabber and cabbage. This is to keep us within arm's reach of the governed. Bin fire keeps us all enjoying the manufactured division. Now, the thing with this, I absolutely understand, Chris, where you make so many self-sabotaging decisions at the highest level of this football club that you start to wonder what the motivation is. Because, you know, to come full circle with what I was saying there to Quinny in relation to the manager, I do believe that level of managers is as high as we can get. A Scottish football club shouldn't have the money we've got in the bank, but you know, that's like maximised. We shouldn't have that kind of money sitting in the bank. We've got all the money in the world that we could need. We've sold out our season ticket packages, right? Yet we don't know what to do. It's like, you know, we're a rudderless vessel. We really don't know what to do at this stage, Chris, right? And I have heard a lot of people with a theory that Slabber and Cabbage has brought up there in relation to they want the competition. One of the main reasons, let's not beat around the bush here, that one of the main reasons why we have been so dominant in the last 15 years is because they are a governed bin fire. They have been. They were on the way down the plug hole. Then they went down the plug hole. And then like a turd that wouldn't flush, they came back up. Right, and this is the main reason why we've been so dominant, lording it up and just getting really lazy and complacent about things, Chris. Right, where it's like, you know, whatever happens, we can just chuck money at it. Oh, we'll sort it. We'll just throw some money at that, and we'll still win. You know, largely we'll just keep winning. Well, absolutely. You know, it is self-harm, and I think we've got to the point where the strategy, in inverted commas, has never been there. There's been a period of time where your Paul Tisdale and Matt Lowell, there was a period of time in between their two tenures at Celtic where we didn't have that role. We didn't have the buffer between the football department and the high hegians. And during that period, we went out and spent that £26 million. Yes, but the board have bottled it since then, Chris. Now, people might say, well, we've had to get rid of Adam Idah. He's been a flop. Adam Idah's not been a flop. He won us a Scottish Cup. He then had a really good Champions League campaign last season. He was part of the team that won the double and got us to a knockout round of the Champions League. He was part of that. You know, he played the 10 games in Europe. And then we've sold him and we've lost a wee bit of money on him, right? But not a great deal, Chris, right?
Tiny amount, for goodness sake.
Austin Trusty might leave the club. I'm not sure. He's injured now. Engels may or may not become the player that he was supposed to be when we signed him for £11 million. But I'll tell you something in this transfer window. I'd much rather have gone out and spent 30 million quid on 3 players. But the board, I don't know what's happened, if it was because Brendan didn't have that buffer and he was going straight to Dermot Desmond, who is the decision maker, Quinny. I mean, let's be honest. He's not the majority shareholder because you need to have more than 50% to be majority, but he's got more shares than everybody else. And he's clearly got the influence of a majority shareholder, Chris. So this is the thing for me when you're looking at the way that we do business. It is amateur hour. And I think we're very, very complacent. And in terms of you're talking about a corporate structure, heads normally would roll. But, you know, how are they going to react to this? They can't give us any of the bluster. They can't give Brendan Rodgers a briefing for the next time he comes out to give an interview and just say, right, this is the party line? Because he's contradicting himself, Chris.
Yeah, I feel sorry for Brendan to an extent. And listen, he's not blameless. We've spoken at length about, his tactics and football, but that's by the by. Tonight is largely about how the football operation should be run, how it should be run well. And you're right. I mean, he's been kind of hung it to dry a bit. He's tried to send give an indication of how he's feeling. He's been a bit subtle about it, a bit coy about it, but the message is coming through loud and clear. He's wanted reinforcements. He's wanted more quality and depth. The word quality seems to be almost plastered to his forehead. It's what he's wanted, and he's not talking to us when he's saying that. He's trying to exert some pressure on the decision makers that are above him. But I think they've got such disdain for not only the manager and the football operation, but for the supporters as well. I really do. I don't think this will cause them any sleepless nights whatsoever. I don't think they care about fan protests or they care about us coming on here and talking about them in these terms. I really don't. I think they see themselves as above that. I think they see themselves as some sort of bizarre class apart, which they're absolutely not.
The bourgeois, absolutely.
And I think that's dreadful. I mean, look, when we talk about the football operation, and we talk about, how they want to operate the football club. Well, look, if you look at another industry, if you look at the retail industry, they spend money on marketing, on advertising. They speculate to accumulate. They throw money in order to try and grow their operation. That's how they become successful, right? And they never stop doing that. If they're releasing a new product, they spend money on how to promote it. They spend money on how to showcase it. We've accumulated all this money in a football operation. For what purpose? It's a football club. The point of the football club is to grow, is to continue to be successful, is to continue to elevate itself, it's to become as good as it can possibly be. So what are we holding money for?
World class, I think, is the term that's been used.
Well, yeah, I heard a certain individual talk about trying to be world class. That was 5 years ago. I think he said it would happen within 5 years. How long we got now? 29 minutes to become world class. Not sure about that one, Mike. So I would have to say that if, however they are judging themselves in terms of their performance, it is completely disconnected from, I would say, almost the entirety of the fan base. And look, the fan base is not made up of wee daft guys or, don't know anything about anything. You're talking about people in all walks of life, all different levels of, business or industry or trade or experience. You cannot discount the opinion of that many people. And when all of them are pointing to you and say, you're doing this wrong, it's time to start looking in the mirror and saying, do you know what? Might be something in that.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And I think also when you, there was a really good, it went kind of viral, that WhatsApp, it was the quotes, Quinny, of all the previous managers dating right back to Ronnie Deila, and someone had painstakingly dug out the quotes of them saying, we need to do this better, we need to do it quicker. And we've had the opportunity as well to speak to people who have been behind the curtain, and in particular during the Tony Mowbray regime and the Neil Lennon regime as well, where, we hear stories and you think, the curl your toes, the kind of stuff that was ongoing. And it was things like, with regards to Tony Mowbray being given promises and promises to sign that deal. He was an up-and-coming manager at the time, and he leaves West Bromwich Albion, comes up the road with Peter Grant, and in the car, Peter Lawwell phoning Granty or Tony Mowbray and speaking to them in the car, and already the goalposts were getting shifted in terms of budgets and players and who was coming in and who wasn't coming in, and players being sold from under their noses. Remember Danny Fox, the left back, so we could make a quick £1 million or something on him. He got sold. Massimo Donati, somehow Tony Mowbray started getting a tune out of him. He got sold under their nose. And then they were buying players that were coming in. Players were being bought for them. They wanted to sign Olivier Giroud. And, these are the players that they wanted to sign. Robbie Keane ended up coming in because Dermot Desmond wanted them to sign for a football club. It's been dysfunctional for a long time, Quinny. And then we talked to Neil Lennon. We spoke to Johan Mjalby actually, and Joe Ledley. And it always sticks with me, the Joe Ledley scenario. He was a brilliant player for Celtic. When we signed him, You know, Cardiff had knocked back a bid of 4 or 5 million quid, I think, in the previous window. But it was that cross-border thing. We managed to get him on a free, I believe, right, because of the stage that he was at in his contract. And Joe Ledley had scored against Kilmarnock in the weekend. And he come into the training on the Monday or the Tuesday, Quinny, and got told, don't train in case you get injured. We've sold you. We've sold you to Crystal Palace. Joe Ledley didn't want to move. Neil Lennon didn't want him to move. But the club sold him for under their nose because they could make a few quid off him. So these are the things that the club have been doing for a long, long time, Quinny. And you know, they'll turn round to us and say, what do you know about recruitment? What do you know about running a football club? Look at the success, count the medals. That is always their answer, Quinny, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like, despite the poor runnings of things, they have managed to, there is some things that has been kind of put into place well, and some things have just been done really poorly. But despite the poor things and how just kind of antiquated and how backward a lot of it is, still managed to relatively, still win some bits and pieces here and there. But it's one of these things where you get confirmation bias in from that. As those people, like, oh well, that worked out pretty well for us. We got away with that one, and this happened then in our kind of stroke of luck, where other players that were signed and turned over well for money, Van Dijk's and whatever, and then laterally, like you're talking about earlier, stumbling across Ange and him like filling our squad up with a bunch of guys that who get sold on and have some wee clippy selling clauses even on those ones. So just kind of want to watch again, getting Brendan back in again. So like it's like, despite their best efforts, they were kind of just about getting away with it, despite them not really trying too hard or kind of going after it. And now it's just, they've all the cards have been played in that way, or all the lives have been had. So
is this the window where it all comes to a head, though? Because I think when obviously Brendan Rodgers was kind of sold that dummy to come back, and he spoke about it at his first conference. You might have been there, Quinny, and Callum McGregor spoke about it as well, about how we were kind of selling this dream that all the issues you had before Brendan, we've sorted them out. We're actually good at recruiting now. So he believed, and he spoke about it, that we were good at that. Sold him a dummy. Rotten transfer window, the first one he came into. Your Palm was in Navrosky's and all that carry on. He wouldn't play half the players. Has it come to a head with this one, Chris, where even the most kind of pro-board Celtic fans among us must be looking at this and going, no, you know what, this does not work. This is completely dysfunctional. We've got a manager who could have built something from the Bayern Munich game, who will not be here next season. Let's not kid ourselves. I don't know what the board will have up their sleeve. You're talking about managers of a similar ilk. It'll probably be Maloney and Kennedy, let's be honest. Yeah. Just want to send you to bed with that nice wee thought, ladies and gents. There's always that. As long as you can be controlled, then you'll do all right here, because we'll just present you with players, and then you better do the best you possibly can. But even if you look at this window, Chris, we're consistently making millions and millions and millions. Now, I know the O deal has broken down, so we're potentially not going to be getting the sell on there, but we've already had 5.5 from Frimpong. I think it was £1 million from Doak. That's just on sell-ons, Chris, right? And then we're selling guys like Kuhn for 16, 17 million pound, and then we're bringing in another 3 or 4 million pound from Lagerbielke, Cantillo, and what we spending? We're making £20 million profit in this transfer window, Chris. So the money you're talking about that we've lost by not getting into the Champions League proper, obviously it's going to be offset by the Europa League earnings. But let's say the differential's 20 million. We've made that up in transfers. Yet our squad's worse. It's dysfunctional. And you've got to try and bed all these guys in that Rodgers didn't want in the first place. So surely even the most hardcore board apologists are looking at this thinking, actually, this isn't working.
Yeah, I mean, it's not difficult to interpret that it's harming the footballing side of the club. I mean, the football side is the most important element of the football club, for goodness sakes. And they are self-harming, because by not speculating enough to get us into Europe's top competition, we're not increasing our profile. Therefore, we cannot bring in the best players. Therefore, we cannot continue to generate the same revenue year on year from, competition participation and, potentially progressing and increasing our profile worldwide and getting all the adulation that comes with that. Instead, we're going into the second competition in Europe, which is great. but then we're not equipping a manager to even go and progress in that. You've got a high-profile manager at the moment. You know, people have differing opinions on whether he's the man to take us forward, but the fact is, at this moment in time, I agree with both you and Quinny. I think he's the best man on paper for the job. But, you know, you can't hire Michelangelo to paint your ceiling and give him an Etch-a-Sketch to do it, right? It just doesn't work. Right? It really doesn't. Right? Give the man the tools he needs. Football is about that. It's about funding the football operation. Doesn't necessarily all work out. Hey, you know what? That's football. You hire a player, you sign a player for money, and you know what? There's still an element of risk around that. Some players might not make the grade. We sign Idah. I think he does pretty well for us. Maybe doesn't hit the heights that we want him to. Do you know what? We let him go. We take a little drop and we start again. We go again. That's football. That's how it works. Every manager's done that. How many duds did Alex Ferguson sign in his tenure? You know, some players, even players who you think are a sure thing, doesn't always work. Right? That's part of the game. And for me, the people who are in charge of the football club at the moment, the club hierarchy, do not understand that element of it. They don't get it, and I think that is a criminal dereliction of duty in a football sense. I really do. I cannot stand to watch the football club that we love be treated with such contempt by those who should want the best for it, and the best for it has to come from the pitch. It has to come from the on-field.
Absolutely, aye. 20 minutes to go in this transfer window, and we have done some business out the door. There he is, Idah. Where did it all go wrong for you, Quinny? He does look pretty happy.
That's the happiest he's looked.
Well, there's certainly been something hanging over him this season, Chris. I agree with you. Where did it go wrong for you, Quinny? Was it the fact that he couldn't establish himself as the number one after Kyogo left?
Yeah, it's one of these ones. Rodgers often describes him as an honest player, you know, and that's, you can maybe read into why he uses that word over and over again for him. But I think it's been one of those ones where it's more like playing for Celtic, is especially if you're a supporter like he is, of course, like, you know, it's maybe going to be termed Mikey Johnson syndrome or something, I don't know, but it just doesn't work, you know. It's just either they want it too much, they feel the pressure of it too much. Whereas if he's going to go play for Swansea, that's just going to be like a job, you know, like it is for some footballers. Obviously, still a footballer, so I'm sure they still like all that part of it. Don't get me wrong, but like it's like going and working for a company in that regard. It's just you're moving to another place, you're working for another team or whatever. But when it's like Celtic, if you're some of these players, I think it's just been that kind of mental block. Because on loan, when there's no like pressure, no price tag, coming in trying to get his career kind of up and going, because it was kind of stalling a bit. He was a totally different player to when he was, you know, bought, signed, sealed and delivered, and now you need to shoulder it, you know, week in, week out. You need to go out there, you need to win the game for us. We don't have Kyogo, you're the main striker, and like he's probably got the raw ability to do it, but but I think some of these guys, it just doesn't work for them. It just, for whatever the reason, I don't want to put a name on it, but I think it's just one of these things, because it's different being at Celtic for these guys compared to being at Swansea or West Brom or, you know, whatever.
I think that was a big part of it, Quinny. I do think that there are certain players who come to Celtic and it's a dream come true, and, you know, they come from a Celtic supporting background, and that was spoken about when Idah signed for the football club, and we go back, we're playing the Cork Cup and all this kind of stuff. But, you know, I don't think that it's part of his kind of makeup that he's at a football club where every single game is a must-win game. Every game. Doesn't matter if you're playing St Johnstone one week and then Bayern Munich the next week. Every game's a must-win. And that level of pressure, Quinny, he's never played under that level of pressure, that intensity of pressure. And I think it gets to some of these guys.
I was thinking this the other day, listening to someone else talking about the same sort of thing. But if you think about Idah, like, see if he plays for Swansea or Norwich, see everyone he knows. They're not going to see every game of football he plays. They're not going to hear about every game of football he plays. But when he's at Celtic, everyone in his life is fully aware of, did he start at the weekend? Did he score? Are the fans on his case? The price tag, blah, blah, blah. So it's just a whole, you can just imagine it being a whole other like dimension of life, you know?
Yeah. Fishbowl, yeah, it really is.
Whereas going to Swansea, like, again, always, you know, like, how many Swansea games are on the TV? You know what I mean? Like, who's going to really, if he doesn't have a good game at the weekend, he can go out the weekend, you can, you know, whatever. He can have Yeah,
he can go out and have a night out, and it's not going to go viral. There's a wee update here. So we've replaced our £7 million departure with a free agent because the contract for Ian Acsom has been terminated, which means the
told you they were skint.
They're skint. They want him off the books by the looks of it. And
but the problem with that is he can now negotiate a pretty high wage. Does that then put us further away from signing him? Because there could be clubs that will be willing to take a punt on giving him wages that maybe are out with their appetite.
Chris,
maybe.
Come on, we're getting a tiny little bit of joy. we're getting a tiny little glimmer of hope that we might have a striker. But you're
guy
right.
that was exciting 10 years ago.
I know. But it's like the moves are happening here to bring up to Celtic, whether or not, I'm looking at this and thinking, is this the type of striker coming into this window that we expected to sign? No. Where was he on the list? I mean, we talk about the list. We've got a list for every single department, every single position, and we've got 5 or 6 players on this list. And you think, where was he on the list? 10th, 11th, 12th? Certainly not in the top 5, right? And we've sold Idah, who, still young when you look at his age profile, moving into a period of his career where he's still to peak, I think, and he could have done that at Celtic unless he's checked out, which it appears he might have done. And we get £7 million for him, and we're bringing somebody in for zip. Now, that's the thing, Chris, because the board will be they'll be rubbing their hands at that.
Yeah.
That's £7 million up. It's just
Surely
a big game. It's a big game to them, And the other departure that we've got here is Stephen Welsh, and that's a player who, when you think about some of the clubs that have been in for him, Udinese, Toulouse were in for this player over the periods that Ange was in charge and Brendan Rodgers' his first season as well. He's had various loan deals out, and there was a mooted deal to go to Plymouth Argyle, but Michael Nicholson didn't answer his pager, and then it all broke down. He's now away to Motherwell, and that's him away to Motherwell for the rest of the season. Stephen Welsh's career's gone a wee bit ski-whiff, hasn't it, Chris? Because, he looked as though it was £3 million when Udinese were going to try and sign him under Ange Postecoglou, and he couldn't get the game time at Celtic, and you're thinking there's a moment in a player's career. He's now 25. He needs to go out there and play competitive football, but his values obviously deteriorated as well. God only knows what he's going to be worth when he comes back after the season, but he's on his way out. Obviously, we've brought in Jamai Simpson-Pusey, another kind of short-term deal from Manchester City. It's all up in the air now. We're going back to Akasos and Tonevs and all this nonsense where, there's no strategy. It was, we went through a period where we brought in CCV on loan, and we signed them for £6 million. We brought in Jota on loan. We signed them for £6 million. And there wasn't the short-termism. Quinn and I spoke about it with a left-back situation. Sarachi follows Schlupp, who follows Valle. You take the loan deal payments and just give Greg Taylor the extra in his wages. Keep him. There's no strategy here, Chris.
No, you're chucking darts at a wall and seeing what sticks at the moment. That's what it seems like. There's no... when we brought in those players that you mentioned, Jota, Carter Vickers, because we were going from with the loan to buy. Loan to buy is a great strategy for us because it gives us the opportunity to assess a player, and then you've got the decision whether to proceed with it, to sign him, and spend the money. It's a great strategy, right? It absolutely makes sense for a club like us. Taking players on loan for us is a huge risk because if the player does well, their value skyrockets, and then you're either busting your wage structure or your transfer strategy to retain them, or the club decides to go and sell them to the highest bidder. The owning club decides to go and sell them at the highest bidder. So I don't really understand why we're taking these players on loan at the moment. That is very short-termism, and for me, it could point to the fact that there is no confidence that the manager is going to be here beyond this season, and therefore they're not prepared to fully invest in players who the next manager who comes in may decide he doesn't want. And I think that when I see, Sarachi coming in, when I see Pusey coming in, when I see, the players that were being linked with for loans coming in, and no loan to buy, just loans, that tells me that these are to plug the gap this season and nothing more. And then it'll be rinse it out for the summer and start again with whatever manager's in place. That's the only way I can interpret the fact that we're going for these sort of loans, and it just that for me tells me that there is no long-term plan. The plan only goes as far as the summer, and no further.
Well, the other thing that you've got to be aware of is that transfer windows, Quinny, have not done right, can affect your business for another 5 or 6 transfer windows following that. You've got guys on the wage bill right now who won't kick a ball for Celtic. Again, who came in Brendan Rodgers' first transfer window. You know, Odin Thiago Holm is still a Celtic player. He's on loan. You've got Mike Nawrocki, Lewis Palmer. These guys are still Celtic players. You know, and bringing in these short-term guys, before you know it, the level of quality in your squad is being diminished. Because if you're bringing in 3 or 4 loan players that leave at the end of the season, Quinny, you're just kicking the can down the road, aren't you? Sorry, mate, you're on mute.
Yeah, it's all very immediate term for it. And the worst thing about loan signing is, like you say, there's no progression in it. It's been a really busy day for me because I've been doing other transfer window centric content, and I was looking at Newcastle today just as a kind of like an example to kind of maybe give you. And Eddie Howe's been at Newcastle for how many seasons? Like 4 or something like that? Probably 5.
This will be his 5th season, actually, yeah.
See, if you just look at players Eddie Howe has signed and you take everyone else out, even though they've just sold Isak today, there's a full starting 11. And the full starting 11 fits together. And it's like on paper, like, you know, see if they came out and they said, oh, we've planned this for the last 4 summer windows, we've planned this for the last 3 windows or whatever, you would totally believe them, you know, like, because it all fits together. They're all, and fair enough, they scrambled a little bit at the end of the window just with the way things went with Isak and whatever. But if you looked at the Celtic team with any of the managers really, but especially right now, and just looked at the Brendan Rodgers ones and go, how do they fit into the team? And can you imagine in like 3 more windows, 3 more summers, what the plan, the strategy the club has to make that a team in 3 or 4 years? You know, you would, yeah, we've not got that. You know,
we don't,
because it's just loans, fill the gaps, and manana.
Go back to that word that was used, connected. They're not connected. The whole thing is disconnected. There's absolutely a dysfunction to it. Thanks everybody for getting involved. We're about 13,500 strong. So obviously a lot of people are waiting or at their wit's end waiting for signings. John Anthony Gorman comes in on the YouTube to say sold Idah before we got a replacement for Kyogo. Wouldn't That's true. We haven't even got a replacement for Kyogo, Marcel and Idah. Wouldn't pay 5 million for Broom, but now we're paying more for a guy with worse stats. It's a joke. North Korea CSC, if you're on the Home Cup ticket scheme, remove yourself tonight. Cancel your direct debits. It's the only way to make change, put a dent in their wallets. There's going to be a lot of talk over the next few weeks and months, I think, in relation to how to force change. Jonathan Brown, if you're happy to dominate domestically, you should be celebrating the board if you want success beyond Scotland. Absolutely, it's completely different. And I think when you look at the amount of people who are in tonight, it's an indication of how frustrated Celtic supporters are this evening with regards to the Gubbins, a really good side who I think were showing real promise in relation to moving up that level onto the Champions League platform, just being gutted basically for dough. Just being gutted for money. Another really, really strange one was the refusal of David Datro Fofana to come to Celtic on loan from Chelsea and instead going to Charlton. What a slap in the face that was, Chris.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. They've just submitted their paperwork to make sure the signing goes through. So they're not sure if it's gone through in time, but I don't know if that will change anything from our perspective. But I want to keep an eye on. But the fact is that if the player himself doesn't want to be at the club, then I'm not sure that's the kind of player you really want coming in, even under the circumstances we're in at the moment. I would rather have players who have got the appetite to come and do well for us. And I know football's a bit of a mercenary business these days as far as players are concerned. But if he's taking a decision, I don't want to go to Celtic, that's not my first choice, then I don't really think he should be he should be on our radar anymore. But for me, he was never. I don't think he was close to even being one of the top 5 targets. From what what we've heard and all the links we've had,
we were about to sign a player for £10 million. Who didn't we weren't his first choice, Chris? We were just about to do that.
Exactly. And the thing that really got me is that if we had just properly prepared and backed the manager for the European tie. Right, and I mean, no disrespect to Kyrat, but we would have beat them. We would have gone through to the Champions League. And that's a game changer for me, for the type of player and the profile of player you want to bring in. You know, I no doubt players are looking at the level of competition we have in Europe now, in Europa League. And again, no disrespect to Europa League. I hope we go on a great run and do well in it. But the point is that if you're a player with real career aspirations, you want to play in the Champions League. And that should mean something that we can guarantee players. We know our domestic league is not great, but we should be in a position to almost guarantee Champions League participation year on year. Give the players the best platform to go and showcase their skills and take that next step in their career. I've got no problem with players using our clubs as a stepping stone, as long as we get benefit from them. As long as we get 2 or 3 years that allows us to progress as a football club, then I'm quite happy if they then want to go and move on to one of the European giants. Fine, right? But the point is, we took a gamble on our ability to hire and bring these players in. And that is so negligent on the board to do that. And that, for me, is the single biggest reason why they are not fit to run this football club.
The thing about the coming in short term, using Celtic as a stepping stone, that only works if you don't have transfer windows like this. It only works if you don't have transfer windows like the first one that Brendan Rodgers suffered 100%. When he came back to the club. Because it needs to be on a cycle. It needs to be on a rotational basis, Chris, so that when that Nicholas Kuhn is ready to leave, you've already done your business in the following window where you have somebody in place. The very fact that we are scratching about for players just now who have to go straight into the team is a disgrace. I said this when we bounced out of Europe and then we went out and signed Balikwisha. Why are we not signing that player in January for a Champions League qualifier? And Kyra, let's be honest, there is no circumstance where Celtic should be getting beat from Kyra. There is no circumstance where that is acceptable. And it's not about disrespecting the team, Chris. It's just, you just need to look at the level they're playing at, where they are in terms of the ranking, and where we've come from our last European campaign. That is, for me, it's up there with one of the worst results in Celtic's history, getting knocked out by Kyra Almaty. So, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that the thing's been orchestrated behind the scenes. The person who ultimately will be blamed, and Brendan Rodgers alluded to this, will be someone from the football department, and it's normally the manager that gets the sack. This was after the sack the board chants, right? You're singing sack the board because, you know, that is a slogan from the early 90s, and that's why we're doing it. The fans singing sack the board know that we can't sack the board. But what you can do is you can put pressure on them. They don't like hearing the chant, Quinny. You know, I heard from a very good source that whilst it was being drowned, I mean, the Celtic board, right? They would sit like that if they could, but they know that the cameras are on them. But Peter Law made sure the PA was switched up to drown out the Celtic fans. They hate the fact that we're singing sack the board. We're looked upon as being spoilt and entitled. How dare you sing sack the board? Look what we've given you. And I keep saying, Quinny, how many hat tricks has Peter Lawwell scored for Celtic? These guys think that they've won us the trophies.
Yeah, and it's, again, like, you would think that would play to our favour, that they think, I don't want booed, so let's get our act together this summer, guys, you know? Let's have them no booze. Aye. We want them cheering us. We want them saying, oh, Peter Lawwell's a great guy. You know, that's the aim. You know what I mean? Is it not? I don't know. Maybe it clearly isn't, is it? But, you know what I mean? You'd think that at some point that would work to our advantage, that they would try and get their act together to not get booed rather than just turn the volume up.
Just turn the volume up, and if there's a tifo we don't like, we'll either ban them or shut the curtains so we can't see it. But, you know, the thing is, I can only speak for Celtic. I know that the regimes that we've had in place have always had stick. Even Fergus got stick. Fergus got booed. But when we look back on his tenure and you see the vision that he had and the way that he had a strategy, I mean, there was no one with a better strategy than Fergus McCann. And you look at it now, it's just all about becoming fat cats. It's all about just making as much money as you possibly can from us minions and trying to squeeze us as much as we possibly can, and having this player trading model where every penny that you bring in is ring fenced. What's that all about? What's that all about? How can we only spend money we make in a transfer window when we've got all that money sitting in the bank? That's not the way that you should be budgeting going into a transfer window. You should be able to say, right, this is your budget because we want to get into this. We've got this qualifier here, and the gaffer reckons we need 3 players. We'll get them in. Make sure they're in. And it's like we just fill jerseys. We constantly fill jerseys. We're bringing players in, Chris, and loaning them out in the same window.
Yeah.
Osmond is likely to be loaned out. Inamura is likely to be loaned out. And you're thinking there is absolutely no strategy whatsoever. And there's a lot of good comments coming through. Soul Biscuits, thanks everybody for sticking with us. I think we've got 2 minutes left of the window, and then it slams shut. This fiasco has brought the whole club down. What about the mood? What about the mood of the fans right now? Kevin Wiseman can't say shambolic enough. Keep saying it until January. I think it's an omni-shambles. I think we've actually moved on to omni-shambles now, right? And we've got Hoggy Boy 1967. Obviously, there will be a replacement for Idah. Yeah, but he's a free agent. We're scraping the barrel. James Tisdale will carry the can for this. In reality, he just joins a list of others before him. He will be the sacrificial lamb, as Chris said earlier. The fish rots from the head. So the situation, in my view, and please disagree if you will, is that we have a situation that Chris outlined earlier on, where we've got someone with 34.7% shareholding in the football club, but he's got such an influence over other big shareholders that he more or less runs a club like he owns it, right? And to the point where it's funny now when we hear stories like, Gordon Strachan turning up for training and thinking that there's a competition winner training with him that day, but it's actually Paddy McCourt. And he's been signed, and Strachan didn't even know who he was. Didn't even know who he was. Dermot Desmond signed him. Gordon Strachan's told us that. Paddy McCourt's told us that, Chris. Dermot Desmond signing players. I mean, what's that all about? That is insane. That is absolutely insane. But the way that you get away with it is because you lord it up, you win all these trophies and quadruple treble. What are you moaning about? We've just won 9 in a row. We've just won trebles. And this is the kind of nonsense that we need to put up with. And a light is only shone in it when things don't go so well. Like you don't get through against Kairat and people start thinking, right, who's to blame? Well, that's the root of the issue right there. And then you move into the people who are in positions at the football club, very high power positions, on very, very good wages as well, who are placed there by the same individual. Therefore, they're not going to rock the boat. Would you rock the boat if you were making 900 grand a year in a job, Chris?
No, absolutely. That's
That's
where
we are. This is where we are.
That's the point. There is no one challenging the status quo at that club because, quite frankly, they're all on a cushy number. They absolutely are. They absolutely are. And I think that extends into the coaching staff as well, by the way. And again, we can only speculate based on what we see. We don't get any information out of the club, so we can only speculate based on what we see and base it on the results. And the fact is, the transfer window has closed now. I'm not seeing any news on signings. I'm actually getting indications that Ian Acsom may have turned us down, so sorry to throw that one in there. Don't know if we'll need to try and validate that one. Connie might be a better place to do so, but
you're like that guy at the end of the night after a real scary movie, and everybody's gone to their bed, and you're just like, look under your bed before you get in to go to sleep. Chris,
listen, if people want to have a moan at me about that, that's absolutely.
If he doesn't sign, where are we? If we don't sign a striker, what have we got? We're running with Shin Yamada, Johnny Kenny, and Callum Osman, who's never kicked a senior football in his life. That's where we are. That is where this regime has taken us.
At this point, there'll be a Celtic scout at the Legends game, seeing if he can get anybody on a contract. To be honest, that's what's going to. That's the position we're in right now. Yeah, just to go back, just to finish on the earlier point, there has to be some sort of independent, objective review of what's going on inside our club. It's ridiculous. If a regulator was to look at a financial services organisation, for example, that was run like this, where assets were being stripped the way they are from our club, where decisions were being made that were not being properly thought through or strategised or governed, then there would be serious questions asked and people would be held to account. The problem is that they're governing themselves from within 4 closed concrete walls that nobody can penetrate. I heard an ex-player, a very senior ex-player, I won't name him, but he described Celtic as being like North Korea. You cannot penetrate it, you cannot get in, and they have complete control within those boundaries. And look, when things are going well, you can absorb some of that, right? You can. I mean, let's be honest, we've had a lot of good times. But part of being a football supporter is you want continual improvement. You want continual progress. You want to see your club reach the upper echelons, go as far as they can possibly go. You never want to be satisfied. You never want to say, that's it, we can't do any more. You know, I don't care if we win 5 European Cups in a row. I want a 6th. That's what it means to be a supporter. And you need people running the club who have that same level of ambition, that same level of passion. And at the moment, for me, we don't have that.
No.
We don't. What we've got is people who are quite happy to look at their bank balance and say, I can get as many heated driveways as I want, or I can get as many days in the golf course as I want. You know, it's not good enough.
I spoke to someone over the weekend there at the fan zone, and we had a right good chat actually, and I've invited him onto Acsom at some point in the near future. And he's gutted at the moment actually. He's been a Celtic season ticket holder for 15 years. And I said to him, well, you know this, you've put more money into that football club than Dermot Desmond has in the last 15 years. And that's true. You know, because, yeah, there has been investment, but not in the last 15 years. They treat the football club as if they own it. They treat the money in the bank as if it's theirs. It's not. John Milan comes in, unbelievable lads. They screwed it with the Champions League qualification. It gives the club prestige and us pride. Brendan got us that 6 months ago. And look at the downfall since then. Yeah, absolutely, Matt McIver, thank you for joining us on the night shift. It's always an absolute pleasure. I'm just waiting to see if any wee snippets come through in the dying embers. The window has closed. The summer transfer window has closed. Celtic have left everything far too late. And this is the thing as well, Quinny, with regards to leaving it late. You know, as someone who speaks about Celtic every day, either on Acsom or just whoever will listen, we've been speaking about and so have you on your shows. We've been speaking about these issues for many, many months, not just in this window. And in actual fact, somebody tonight said something about Acsom being in bed with the board. They've not got a clue what they're talking about. For 8 years, we have been calling out this board. For 8 years. Probably Kevin Graham was more vehement 8 years ago than he is now. He's mellowed a wee bit with old age. And I think he's passed it on to me, actually. If you listen to the early episodes, he was a wee bit more vehement than I was, and it's kind of flipped because I'm maybe talking about it every single day. Every nuance is being studied. But in terms of what next, there's going to be an aftermath, Quinny. We're going to be looking at the squad tomorrow and say, right, where did we not strengthen? How much money did we make in this window? Did we need to be making money? Why are people choosing Charlton over Celtic? Why is Yang still in the building? We'll be asking all these questions. I didn't think Paddy Roberts would be in the discussion tonight, but he was, because that's who Birmingham went for instead of Yang. And the thing with Yang, obviously the rumour mill is saying that, again, you know, Michael Nicholson wasn't answering his phone to get the deal done. Now, by the way, we know that that's happened because Siegrist has told us that that's happened. Plymouth Argyle have spoken out about it. Go Ahead Eagles have, you know, their director when it comes to Jacob Breum spoke about that, Quinny. I can't say it often enough. Those in charge of these decisions that get the deals done, and it's above Brendan Rodgers' head. These people need to be held to account for this. It's very difficult, though, as football fans to do that these days because they've got a closed shop, like Chris was describing there. You can't penetrate their inner clique, the inner sanctum. Fans can protest, and I'm sure they will between now and the end of the season. There will be banners, there will be chants. But there's also the Celtic Trust avenue in relation to a drive to bring Celtic, small Celtic shareholders together so that they're properly represented, but also to combine shares in a proxy, not give them away. They still belong to the person who owns the shares, so that the trust becomes that proxy so that they can get to a point of 5% and have more of an influence, Quinny. There needs to be some kind of approach where you have an influence in the boardroom, where you can call an EGM, where you can actually, because even, Chris, even if there was that independent review, they would never print the results anyway, mate. We're probably waiting on 3 or 4 of them as it is.
Yeah,
they would never print. We would never know. They would never share the outcome of that.
You just never get the truth. You never get the insight, and it's frustrating.
Chris,
so we need a window in to see what the hell's going on.
You've got to.
Yeah.
You've got to get behind the curtain, and that's why Chris, myself, and a few other of the Acsom troops will be at the AGM tomorrow. Quinny, I know that your suit jacket and all the rest of it is hanging up along with your tie. Sum it up for us, mate. Sum it up just before we wrap it up.
It's certainly disappointing. I think, I was just thinking as you were finishing up there as well, like there has to be a statement that comes out tomorrow, like an official, like Celtic has released a statement, and it explains what the hell's went on, some sort of, this is what's happening. I expect somebody to get bagged, it's absolutely terrible. And I was going to say something else off the back of that, sorry, but I just totally slipped off the back of my head there. Oh yeah, because really, like if they had their way, they would have spent money today. Like they got the fear of the Sharks coming out after the Kairat game. Went and bought Balikwisha, flew out there apparently to Belgium to make it happen. They would have spent the money on Dolberg if they were allowed to, and they would have spent money maybe one or two other places if they were allowed to. But they've just made such a mess of it. Obviously, none of that except for Balikwisha actually got over the line. But I think they've, like you guys, I'm not optimistic, but I'm thinking like, how can they not be aware of all the furore that's going around? And I know they are insulated and they're in their little kind of cocoon or whatever, but it felt like there was a reaction to it after the Kairat thing. And if we don't hear from them tomorrow, like I think that confirms everything these are saying essentially in that case of like they are tone deaf, they are every dimension of deaf to the situation, to the fans, and don't care to change that or even give the illusion of caring for that. So I think you expect a statement tomorrow, because the slight kind of gambit they could have got out this window with is if we spent 30 million over the last 4 days, like Balikwisha, Dolberg, if you went and got 4 players in Rapid, maybe I'm making a big number, whatever, but if they would then maybe just maybe just go, okay, well, they'll be happy now, they'll leave us alone, and then it'll be back to focusing on the pitch, and what do you think about Dolberg, and what do you think about this guy, and da-da-da-da-da. But they've not even got that up their sleeve now, so there's no hiding, there's no like it will get brushed under the carpet, wait till the next time Rangers lose a match, or whatever it is they do to use as a checkpoint. That would just be, that's gone. There's no hiding place, that, and that's probably the best way of finishing it for me.
We don't even have Willow Flood. Andy Marshall, thank you for supporting the channel. And Jonathan Brown, I grew up in North Wales, surrounded by EPL fans. When we beat Liverpool in 2003, you can't imagine the bragging rights at school the next day. That seems like a long time ago, Jonathan, in relation to where we are now. 6 months ago seems like a long time ago, in actual fact. I'm going to ask you the final question, Chris. Where does it leave Brendan Rodgers?
In a very, very challenging position. Almost, if not quite fully, but almost untenable. Because, look, the manager will he'll succeed or he'll fall on what happens on the park. And I think he's been dealt a very, very rough hand. He's not exempt from responsibility in terms of some of the poor results. I mean, I think you have to work under challenging circumstances, and I think the best managers can do that. But we should never put a manager of his calibre, and given what he's brought to the football club in both his tenures, the amount of trophies and the amount of success he's brought, we should never have put him in that position. So I'm still very much on Brendan Rodgers' side. As people who've watched this podcast will know that I've given him criticism in recent shows, because I have criticised what we've seen on the pitch. But I never thought for 1 second that he would be working under the kind of conditions that he is. And if he goes of his own volition, or if he has to fall on his sword either through results or for the fact that he simply feels he can no longer work within the confines of this football club, I think he goes with far more, I would say, affection from the support. I know he'll always have his distractors, I can understand that, but I think he'll have a lot more people on his side under these circumstances. I think the ire of the majority of fans, in my view, is directed at the right place, and that's behind the scenes at the football club.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, the last time it was this busy on Acsom, the only time it's been as busy as this is when we got humped 7-1 from Borussia Dortmund, and there was that influx of frustration and anger. And I think there's quite a lot of that tonight by the way that we've conducted ourselves. We've been an absolute embarrassment, quite frankly, in this transfer window. And you look at the Yang and the Idah deals in isolation, it's just not the way to conduct yourself. That's going to have long-term issues. It's going to create long-term issues with our dealings with other clubs, with our dealings with other agents, and even players. Because before you know it, you're thinking that is an absolute comedy. That's a joke of a club to deal with. We're not dealing with them. They're coming in, lowballing us. You know, they're no answering the phone once we've agreed a deal and you know, verbally. It's embarrassing, Chris.
Yeah. Do you know, I just want to make a point on Yang. It's been very obvious now that Yang is not wanted by the manager or those in power at the football club. They were prepared to let him go. He's now with us. He's now going to be part of this squad. How on earth do you motivate a player like that? How can you possibly get the best out of Yang now because of the way this has been conducted? The damage goes beyond just the manager. This will bleed into the squad. You know, Yang will feel it. Maybe the Yang's affiliates within the club will feel it. You know, it'll put players off potentially from that sort of market because of the way they've been treated. It's dreadful. There's been no strategy. There's been no forethought. Nobody's thought about the consequences or the implications if they get it wrong. And it's so negligent and so damaging to our prospects this season. I really think it's dreadful.
It is, and we'll cover every single kick of the ball and every comment and every quote and every misplaced tie. We will be covering it on A Celtic State of Mind. Lucy says heads should roll. If that happens, we'll cover that as well. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. And hopefully there will be a wee bit of late news in relation to a striker. Otherwise, we're running with Yamada and Kenny. Thanks, everybody, and join us again at 12:30 tomorrow on A Celtic State of Mind.